Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's Power Hour, Big Impact, Small Budget, Building a Strong and Simple Brand, presented by Whitney Bobbitt, owner of Northern Pine Design. My name is Trish Todd. I'm the Vice President of the Blue Springs Chamber, and we are thrilled that you're here with us today. A couple reminders. We have Power Hour sessions scheduled every month for the remainder of 2025. They're always at 10 a.m., first Tuesday of the month via Zoom. We're also recording this session, and we'll be adding the recording to your online resource center that exists in your member information center. That's what you view when you log in to your member website and through the Chamber's website. So if you miss any Power Hour, you can go back and watch it or even share it with one of your coworkers. We want to leave as much time as possible for the content and to take questions. So rather than going into introductions in the room, please put your name, business, or organization in the chat. That way we know who's with us today. And as we go about the presentation today, if you have questions, Becca will be monitoring the chat and Whitney will answer as many as possible. Today's presenter, Whitney Bobbitt, received her undergrad in graphic design. And while she was at a Fortune 500 company working on their in-house advertising team, she earned her MBA and learned everything from designing retail signage to executing press checks. She then moved to a corporate event planning agency where she designed and planned the visual creative for medium and large scale incentive trips, sales meetings, customer hospitality events, and product launches. From Super Bowl to the Sundance Film Festival to the Masters, she has a resume chock full of experience that gives her a unique perspective on how you can elevate your brand to the next level. During COVID, it brought the corporate event world to a grinding halt, giving Whitney the nudge she needed to launch her own company, Northern Pine Design, and dedicated herself full time to the freelance clients and products. Whitney Bobbitt, everyone.
All right, I'm going to try to share my screen here. I'm not really sure how much of this I need to go over because my bio was so thorough. But really quickly, I just want to talk about some of my previous experience, and hopefully that'll give you a better perspective of why I'm focusing more on the visual parts of building a brand. So branding is a very, very broad topic, and there are a lot of components that are just as important as a logo. But the bulk of this presentation will be focused on the more visual aspects, since that's what my expertise is. As for my company, Northern Pine Design, we offer a wide range of services for mostly small to medium-sized companies. We do a decent amount of brand development and also logo design for new companies, as well as a few not-for-profits. But the bulk of our work is actually for existing companies who already have brands established and they need marketing pieces or support material produced. Our largest client is actually my previous employer, the event planning agency. They were able to survive the COVID wave and are still in existence. And they actually contract with me to develop a lot of event-based branding for their clients. So for example, if they're planning a sales incentive trip to Aruba, then I come up with the event logo. I'll create the invitation to send out to the people who qualify, develop each and every touch point that will be part of that week-long experience. So that would be everything from name badges to the event staff uniforms, custom decor pieces. I will oftentimes work alongside a web developer or an app designer in order to make sure that all of that is part of like the same overall event branding. Awards dinner menus, signage, custom swag like beach bags, beach towels, things like that. So all of those items have to be designed by somebody, and they also have to be branded. So we take care of all of that and then help give everything a very cohesive and professional look. So those still branding, a lot of what we do is more short-term branding that ceases to exist at the conclusion of each event. So before we go into the nitty-gritty of the content on actual branding, I want to spend a little bit of time covering some basic principles of design. I think that if you can understand some of these basic things, then when I go into more depth later, it'll make a little bit more sense. So bear with me on some of these graphic design details that we're going to go through here at the beginning. So the first thing that I think is important for anybody who owns a business or is involved in marketing to understand is the difference between a raster and a vector image. These are basically the two main file types that exist anytime you're talking about any sort of image or logo. So vector files, they typically require special software to open or edit them. The most common one is Adobe Illustrator. These files are created using a series of mathematical points, lines, and curves. So the most common file types for vector is .ai, .eps, or sometimes .pdf is what the file name will end in. Vector files can be scaled infinitely larger and they never get blurry or pixelated or lose any resolution because of the way that they're created. Screen printing in particular requires vector files in order to produce their print process. So anytime that you're printing or embroidering on a garment of any kind, the printer is going to ask for a vector file. If the logo that you have developed is not in a vector file, then you're going to run into some issues getting your brand onto anything that is fabric. So the second type of image is a raster file. This is basically the opposite of a vector. So this can be viewed or edited by a huge variety of computer programs. Anything from Paint to PowerPoint to Photoshop can view or even edit this type of image. So the most common file types of a raster would be a JPEG or a PNG, which I'm sure all of you have seen many, many times. Raster images are comprised of dots or pixels. So if you zoom in far enough, eventually you'll get down to the pixel level where you can actually see solid little squares of color that make up the shape itself. So on the slide, the A on the right was initially a solid black color. And you can see that, I don't know if you guys can see my mouse or not, but along these edges here, those are not actually black pixels. Those are like variances of gray. And the way that that works is by zooming out, the grays right next to the black end up blending and making what appears to be a really beautiful curved line. But if you blow it up too far, then you can kind of see these little stair steps, which is when we call something pixelated. And doesn't look very good. So if you are using a very small raster image and you try to put it on a billboard, you're going to run into this issue and it does not look good. So another visual that I have to kind of explain this different dynamic, I've got two different apples. The left is a high resolution raster image, which is an actual photograph of an apple. And then the right is an illustration, which includes crisp lines. It's obviously less realistic because it has less variance in color and virtually no shading. So you can convert this vector into a raster. And in essence, that would just be like taking a screenshot or taking a photo of it, and it will look identical. It'll be the exact, it'll view as the exact same, um, whether it's vector or raster once it's been converted. However, if you try to do it the other way around and take a raster image and convert it to vector, sometimes it produces some funky results that is not probably going to look that great once you print it. So in order to illustrate this, I took the screenshot and I used my Adobe Illustrator program. There's an auto convert tool, an attempt to convert this to a raster file. And so what you can see on the right is it's been converted to a vector. However, it doesn't exactly look like the exact same apple. So we're going to zoom in on it so you can kind of see the difference here. Um, it's lost most of its water droplets. And then also, though it does look decent, if you focus in on that word ink on the bottom right-hand corner, on the N and the K, you can see how those are not perfectly straight lines with the type. The program did its best at tracing this and converting it into a vector, but there's always going to be some anomalies, such as like this little piece right here on the N, and you can kind of see the waviness of the K, where it just doesn't look quite right. So I guess in summary, you cannot take a raster image and convert it to a vector and then print it on a t-shirt without having at times some unexpected results. So as you develop your brand, it's really important that you first start off with a vector file, which then you can convert to JPEG for any of your needs. But you always need that like premium vector file available for the types of printing that require it. Okay, a little bit on color. So Different colors and different color combinations evoke certain emotions and associations. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. That's the reason why we have the phrase power tie. A power tie is typically red. It signifies authority, strength, passion, sometimes even intimidation. Other colors tend to evoke other emotions. And so when you're selecting a color palette for a brand, it's important that you consider how you want your audience to feel when they're looking at your advertisement or interacting with your brand, and select colors and combinations that lead into that. I also want to go through a little bit more of a technical explanation of how colors are produced. So there's three different ways of mixing or achieving colors. I'm actually going to start on the right with spot colors. Spot colors are pre-mixed solid inks. There is no variation or gradient. So if you think like if you went to the store and bought a can of paint, that's the color that it is. And if any of the droplets of paint in that bucket are all going to be the exact same color, it is solid and mixed throughout. Pantone is the golden standard of color identification for the print world. It is always a perfect match. Pantone does have color books for other industries such as fashion, interior design, and plastics. And each of those systems has their own set of numbers and mixes. But for the purposes of this presentation, when I reference Pantone or a PMS color, I'm referring to the Pantone solid matching system. So any designer or brand agency that you work with will have probably multiples of these. These are Pantone swatch books. They're ridiculously expensive, unfortunately, to purchase, but you can see that this shows every single possible Pantone color that there is. And then on each swatch, it'll give me the number, the RGB equivalent, the hex equivalent, as well as the CMYK equivalent, depending on what print process you're using to achieve that color. Which brings me to the CMYK, which is process printing. So CMYK printing, unlike spot color, which is like a bucket of paint, CMYK uses four very specific different ink colors. Those ink colors are cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Through the use of those four colors, 16,000 different shades can be produced. This is what I would say a majority of the printing that you all would see on a day-to-day would be printed using, is the mixed process printing of CMYK. And the final color mixing system is what we call RGB. And this is the way that screens or technology uses light in order to show color to your eyes. For whatever reason, because of the way that that technology works, RGB color mixing can produce up to 16.7 million different shades. So there may be a color that you see on your screen that it is actually impossible to reproduce in print. That's because of the luminosity or the light that is behind that color. So if you think about like a neon or a fluorescent color, and a really good example is that lime green that's on that RGB circle that you can see, that color is virtually impossible to present or to produce in print, because it has like a glowingness to it. Now you could get a color that's like similar in tone, but it's going to feel flatter and duller. So because of that, you want to be very careful not to use your screen as a way of selecting color, because if something is designed in RGB color space, and then you then go to try to print it, what your computer is going to do is it's basically going to translate it to the colors in CMYK that it thinks is the closest. And it might be very close, or it might actually not be that close at all. So whenever you're developing a brand, it's important that you start on the right by selecting Pantone spot colors that you like or that you want to be part of your brand. And then Pantone will provide you, okay, so for example, in this illustration, I've used PMS 7408C, which is that yellowish orange that you can see up there. Then the Pantone swatch book will tell you the CMYK breakdown of that is 0% cyan, 24% magenta, 100% yellow, and 0% black. And then they will also list out how to get that exact color on somebody's screen. So if you go from right to left, you are going to always be in great shape. If you try to go left to right, you're probably going to run into some issues. Okay, so the final visual branding basic that I'm going to touch on is typography and fonts. I'm sure all of you are aware that there's a huge variety of different fonts that are available. You are looking at the most common font type categories on your screen right now. Clearly, different types of styles evoke different emotions and themes. Brand fonts should be selected carefully to ensure that they convey the correct feel. Most reputable brands select a very simple, either serif or sans serif font. Occasionally, a display font might be used in a logo itself or occasionally in a headline. But super stylized fonts have a tendency to feel really old really quick. They also go in and out of style pretty quickly. And so, my general advice would be to stick with something very basic, um, so that it has a little bit more longevity with your brand. Okay, so the definition of branding is the process of creating a unique identity for a product, service, or company that resonates with your target audience and distinguishes you from the competition. Uh, there are two major components to branding. One would be like the actual visual branding, which is what we're focusing mostly on today. So the logo, the typography, and color palette are all components of the visual branding. But then there's also additional aspects such as product positioning, the personality or tone of your brand, the in-store experience, and then also customer service. I wanted to show this. Well-defined brands are recognizable even without the presence of a business name. So I'm sure that everybody on here can tell me exactly what these two companies are, even though I've removed the actual business names from both of these ads. So I realize that none of you on this call have the marketing budget of Target and Walmart, but the consistency and recognition is definitely something that you want to strive for. So at the end of the year, if you pull out all of the marketing pieces that you've produced, whether it be social media or advertisements, personal branding like business cards and letterhead, if you put all those up on a whiteboard at the same time, they should all feel like part of the same campaign. The first thing that we do whenever we are working with a client to develop a brand is we have a lot of discussions about their target audience. We need to understand who their audience is, so that we can speak directly to that specific audience and their needs, desires, and pain points. So in this illustration, all the water bottles over here on the right are pretty well-known brands. I'm sure you've seen them all at some point at a convenience store or grocery store. And everybody in the world drinks water of some kind. But to say, if you were creating a brand for a water company, to say that the entire world is your target audience is not specific enough. So the person that chooses the 20-cent Kirkland bottle of water on that bottom row is not the same person that buys the $2 Fiji or even the Voss glass bottle, which is at the very top. The Voss consumer is most likely concerned about plastic waste, which is why they're attracted to a water bottle that comes in a glass bottle. Maybe they're really into trendy packaging or they think it looks cool when they carry it around. We know for sure they're not picking Voss because it's the cheapest. So, understanding who you're trying to appeal to and then really going after that will help you have more success in all of your branding. Core values is another thing that needs to be considered. So once you've identified your target audience, you need to understand what their core values are and then speak to those. So, for example, the brand positioning of Whole Foods, and I looked these up, is to nourish people and the planet. That is how they summarize their brand positioning. Aldi, which is another grocery store, they describe their brand positioning as save people money on the products that they want most. Now, both of these brands are successful in their own right. However, Aldi branding would be focused more on savings and value, whereas Whole Foods branding, as you can see in this image, try to focus more on nature and like a wholesome look. And with a nod to like the planet and making sure that they evoke green practices. So ads for these two companies, even though in essence they sell the same product, need to look very different. All right, so visual identity. This is the part that I like. I looked up the top 10 most valuable brands in the world, and you can see on the screenshot here what they are. So number 10 is the only one that is not a USA brand. That is like a bank, I believe, in China. So that's not probably something that most of you are used to seeing. I'm not sure I'd ever seen that logo, but with all the rest of the remaining 9 on the top, they are legible and recognizable. If you start taking notes of some of the things that these brands have in common. Most of them use few colors. They have no gradation to the logo, and they don't utilize any shadows or other super stylized elements in their logos. If you contrast this with three other brands, which I've put at the bottom, Cold Stone Creamery, Ghirardelli Chocolate, and then also, this is actually the old Olive Garden logo. I think they updated a couple years ago, but I wanted to use this one because I find it to be so poor. But bringing them down to a small size like this at a glance, which oftentimes your experience with the brand is going to be the logo will be fairly small. You can't really tell what that icon is at the top of the Cold Stone logo. It's actually a very stylized ice cream cone, but it kind of looks like a blob. One of the things that they taught us in design school is that every logo needs to be reduced to 1 inch by 1 inch, print it on a piece of paper, and then look at it and see if you can tell what it is. And if you can't, then you need to make some changes. So Ghirardelli is a great example of there's not really anything about their logo that doesn't look nice, but when you make it really small, it's hard to tell what's going on. It kind of just looks like a big mess of colors. You can't read the word chocolate underneath. And actually, that blob on top of the name is an eagle, which you can't see either. Same thing for Olive Garden. They used a fairly illegible font. The grapes on the right are, or I guess those are probably olives, but they are using gradients and they kind of just look like a jumbled mess when you look at them at a glance. So these are not probably logos that you would want to take any cues from. Let's see, I already went over color on the previous slide. And then another thing that's really important when you're developing a visual identity is to have some sort of a brand guideline. This allows you to share best practices and like just the general look of what you want everything to look like with multiple employees or even agencies, depending on how you work out all of your marketing pieces. Is that not advancing? There we go. Brand voice. So the best way that I can think of to describe brand voice is if you consider a 30-second television spot. What does the voiceover sound like? What are they saying and in what type of tone? So is it slow and smooth like Matthew McConaughey, or is it more friendly and upbeat like Jimmy Fallon? Or is it more of a commanding tone like Samuel L. Jackson? So these different voices convey very, very different feelings for consumers. So I included Nike up here. Nike is known for an inspirational and motivational voice. Apple is minimalist and innovative. Harley Davidson is more aggressive and confident. And Tiffany & Co. is elegant and timeless. So you want to consider not just what you're saying with actual words and copywriting, but how it's being said and then how it's being interpreted by your target audience. One thing that's super important is that there's a consistent experience across all of your consumer touch points. Consider if your color palette was one particular group of colors on your website and then different in your email, a different set of colors maybe on your business cards, and then other colors were used on your social media posts. Everything would feel really off. So customers might even second guess if they went to the wrong website or if they were interacting with the same business that they thought that they were trying to contact. So consistency is important. I realize it can feel boring, especially if you're the single person in charge of developing the many different touch points, but it's imperative that your audience understand exactly who you are and that they know that they're interacting with who they think that they are. I actually included a link on this, and if you guys want access to these slides, Becca has them and she can shoot them out if anybody would like to reference any of this. But at the bottom, this is the online version of Starbucks. It's a little bit condensed and consolidated, but of their brand guidelines. I think it'd be interesting for you to just click through and look and see what types of things are included in a brand guideline so that you can kind of think about what sort of parameters you want to set for your own brand. Most large company brand guidelines are anywhere between like 50 and 150 pages long. That is completely unrealistic for a small to medium-sized business. So what I usually do for companies that I'm working with whenever they're a startup and they not only don't have a need for that extensive of a brand guideline, but also they don't have the money to develop one either, is I create like a brand one page for them, which is at least going to get them started and kind of help them communicate to their employees or to anybody that's helping them with marketing efforts on how their logos and branding should be used. So on this page, I have a couple examples of some brand one pagers that I've given to clients. This is just the top half, but the company on the left was a like a pet store type thing, an online pet store, and then on the right is actually a like capital investment firm. So this one's not necessarily consumer facing as much, but I include, the different fonts that they should use, various types of logos that they could use in different formats, as well as icons. And then I've got all their color breakdowns so that it's all in one easy to understand place and easy to find as they sometimes produce their own content because budgets don't always allow for you to use an agency for every single piece. All right, so initial investment. Creating a brand from scratch is all over the board as far as how many dollars you're going to spend. Um, there's obviously some budget options, which could be anywhere from if you do it yourself, it could literally be free. And there's also a lot of templates or websites that you can use to kind of hire designers or people that will utilize templates on your behalf in order to create logos for you. So that would be something like Etsy, Canva, Envato, Creative Market, anything that's a template, those are options. A little bit above that would be hiring a designer that also uses a template. So that would be more like Fiverr or Upwork. Um, Usually on Fiverr or Upwork, you can get a logo for between like $120 to $400 maybe. And a lot of times they'll just have preset templates and you'll be like, yeah, I like that one, dump my name into it and then send me the files. Tier two would be freelancer contract designers. That's like what we are at Northern Pine. So an individual or a very small agency, which would create a custom brand for you from scratch. So this would involve initial meetings, market research, competitor research, and then also a number of hours of design time as well as positioning in order to be able to provide you with the final assets of logo, comprehensive brand guideline, and other essential branding assets that might be specific to your industry. Tier three would be a full service agency. This is what the big guys do. So this could cost anywhere as little as maybe $10,000 up to 50,000, 100,000. Like the sky's the limit on how much you would want to spend on this. This would be companies that have full on teams of designers, teams of copywriters, multiple editors and animators, all working together to produce a well planned and calculated strategy, which would cover social media, website development, television spots, all kinds of things. So obviously, depending on where you're at with your company journey, will dictate which tier you fall into here. I want to highlight a couple pitfalls of when you go a little bit too cheap on establishing your brand off the get-go. Some ways that this may end up costing you more money or at the very least quite a bit of headache later on. Go ahead and read through this bullet point here on the left. I think those are all really good points. But the first thing I want to highlight is limited configuration. So if you were to select a template and be like, oh yeah, I like that, I like the way that looks, throw in my business name there, and I'm going to consider that my logo. Well, that logo template may only be a horizontal logo. And then if you are in a circumstance where you need to provide a vertical logo for something, you don't have what you need. So, for example, on this t-shirt, and I don't even know what this event was, I just found this image on Google, but this is the back of a t-shirt, and these are a bunch of sponsors that sponsored this hikeathon. And if you look down here at this bottom logo, I think it's important that this logo maybe looks pretty good. Maybe it's a really nice logo, but they clearly don't have a secondary option of a logo that fits better in the amount of space that's allocated to this company. So like this company right here has the exact same amount of space, but it's so much easier to read what's going on there. So if this company had used a good branding agency, then they would probably have a layout that would fill the space better and have a little bit more presence because you don't always have control over where your logo is going to be used. Let's see. My bullet regarding business owners can sometimes have troubles being objective. So I'm going to tell a quick little story here. I worked recently with a not-for-profit organization. They were just starting up and needed some branding. And the guy that was starting this organization is actually ex-Special Forces. So he, when asking questions and our initial like email string and phone conversation, asking about what he wanted in his logo. He wanted something really masculine that him and his friends would want to wear. He wanted shirts that had the logo on it, and he wanted it to really like feel like him. Well, the purpose of his organization is to help widows. So he also simultaneously expressed that he wanted a brand that is not intimidating to widows. It makes them feel welcomed and supportive. And he also attached to the email a couple logos that he had designed using Canva for me to use as a starting point. So it's an important side note that any imagery derived from Canva cannot be trademarked or protected by intellectual property rights. So even if his design was really good, I would still have to start over and create something from scratch if he wanted to own his logo. Through my customer intake form, and then also quite a few follow-up conversations, we were able to determine that his target audience um, maybe wasn't exactly what he thought it was initially. He wanted a masculine looking logo because he wanted to rep his brand, but that type of logo didn't really make sense for what he was designing for. So we determined his real target audience as well as the desired voice and personality of the brand, which ended up being not at all similar with where he started. Ultimately, he was thrilled with the brand that resulted, but we did have to have quite a bit of back and forth to really uncover the true vision and develop something that made sense for them. So that's what I mean by a lot of times business owners can have troubles being objective because you maybe want something even though that may not be what makes sense. Let's see here. My comment or my bullet about legal ramifications. So as I mentioned before, anytime a template is used to create a logo, you do not own exclusive rights. You have no legal recourse to tell somebody else that they can't use that same logo. So in theory, some competitor of yours in the exact same town could purchase the exact same logo and use it, and there is nothing that you'd be able to do. Here's a visual example of kind of that same scenario. This is a logo that's currently trending on Creative Market. And when you do a Google image search for visually similar images, you can see how there's a lot of other templates and businesses that use very similar imagery. So it all kind of blends in, which makes it difficult to differentiate your brand. Let's say that you're a boutique hotel, but a hair salon is already using this exact same logo kit. Even though the name of the business might be different, people who've seen the business in the other industry might associate the look with that service and not with your product. So it can create confusion if unfortunately you are to select a template that is already being used by existing businesses. Let's see. I have an example, but it's kind of a long story, and I want to make sure we leave time for questions, so I'm going to skip it. Here's another example of having a logo created that might be in the wrong format that is actually very unusable. So on the left, you will see a logo or an image that was created. This is sort of like a watercolor look of a cookie. There's honestly nothing wrong with this image. However, it's not really a viable logo. And the reason why is because there's too many varieties of colors and gradations used within this image. So let's say that somebody says, no, I think it's beautiful. I want to use this as my logo. 6 months in, you decide to sponsor a kids' bake sale. And on the thank you to your sponsor banner, that's only printed in one color because it's all that the bake sale budget allows. So you convert this image to a one color spot, and the resulting image is what we have here on the right. Because anything that's color all becomes the same one color, and then it looks like that. So the image on the left is not possible to create using a vector graphics program. And so there's no way to individually switch out these colors if you select a logo that has this like watercolor look here on the left. So having a full brand package that addresses all predictable situations can really help mitigate issues like this before they ever arise. It would be really sad to have spent months creating a brand and building reputation on this branding here on the left, only to realize that it doesn't work in a lot of the ways that you need it, and then having to rebrand, which of course is more expensive than the initial branding itself. So rebranding and refreshes. A lot of times these terms are used interchangeably, which is probably fine. We don't really need to split hairs on it, but um, rebrands and refreshes can be as extensive as changing everything, including the company name. Like Sprite a couple years ago completely rebranded as Starry because an adult film star obtained the intellectual property rights of the word Sprite once they expired and Sprite did not renew them properly. So then Sprite had to change their name. So that would be a full rebrand. Whereas a refresh would be you still maintain components of your existing brand, but then you change other things in order to keep it updated or fresh to reflect either new or more accurate product offerings, or even just to kind of make it feel more up with the times. A couple of visual examples of some refreshes on the right of brands that you're probably very familiar with. Dunkin' actually changed their name from Dunkin' Donuts to just Dunkin', though they kept a lot of the same visuals, fonts, um, even just kind of shaved off part of their logo there. Burger King, of course, they kept their same name and then they've updated their logo and icon. And then Starbucks kept a lot of the same components, but simplified by removing the Starbucks and the coffee outer ring from their mermaid or whatever that female icon is in the middle. I thought it would be fun to include a couple popular brands and what they have spent on either their brand or on their brand redesign. So Google's the first one I'm going to show you. The very top logo in 1998, that was created by one of the founders himself. I'm guessing based on the font selected, he probably just used like a word processing program and typed out Google. They did have their brand refreshed in 1999. They hired a professional designer, but the designer was a friend of the developers, and I do not believe any money exchanged hands for that. And then they recently, I don't know, a couple years ago, they actually took their entire marketing team on a 1 week retreat and they rebranded themselves. So they did not hire an external marketing agency or branding agency to redo their logo. They had their in-house designers do it, and it actually turned out beautifully. So Google's brand, though one of the most valuable in the world, is actually $0 in cost. I thought this was an interesting case study. Tropicana, which is a brand I'm sure all of you are aware of, a couple years ago, they hired a branding company to redo only their packaging design. And you can see the before on the left and the after on the right. They paid the Arnell Group $35 million to redesign this package for them. And in the first 2 months alone, they lost $30 million in sales once those new packages hit the shelves. So they scrapped the new packaging, went back to their old packaging, and were at a deficit of $65 million with the packaging that they had already had initially. And then I'm sure some of you guys have seen this recently. Walmart rebranded. I'm not sure if most people noticed, unless you happen to see a article on Business Insider, but they paid $1.25 million to go from the logo on the top to the logo on the bottom. JKR Global is one of the most reputable branding and advertising agencies in the world. So they obviously have a very high price point, but a pretty significant amount of money for a very subtle rebrand. So final considerations. This is just sort of a miscellaneous thing that I wasn't really sure where to put in my presentation, but on the right is just like a small little screenshot of my client intake form. And then on the left, I've included a list of some of my favorite questions from my client intake form, just for you to consider. Now, whether you do it yourself or you use a template or you work with another branding company, this is a really good place to start when you're trying to hone in on your brand, whether you're just trying to refine what you already have, or if you're looking to rebrand or start a new business. These are some really good considerations of questions you can ask, which will hopefully help you land on something that speaks to the type of audience that you're wanting to speak to. All right, and then this is a resources page. I wanted to add this to give anyone in the market for a new brand a good starting point. To recap, I don't really recommend that anyone design their own brand. Or even use a logo template just because of the intellectual property ramifications, as well as some of the pitfalls that might be challenging for somebody without a design background to navigate. However, if you choose to go that route, or that's all that your budget allows, I've included some options up here. And then also, I didn't want to indicate that the template sites are, something that you should stay away from 100%. I actually use a couple of these sites myself. I use the Adobe stock site sometimes for imagery that I use for various marketing pieces as well as fonts. And then I use Creative Market sometimes for some layout templates. So some of these actually have a lot of value if used properly. For example, on Creative Market, they have some really good social media packs that you can purchase that'll give you maybe 20 different layouts. Now, making sure that you select a pack that is on brand with what you already have and the way that you're communicating to your audience is really important. But as long as you can do that effectively, this can save you hours by not having to develop new layouts every time you want to make a social media post. So there's definitely some ways that you can use these resources to save yourself time and money without that you can either do it yourself or you can aid a designer in essence using less hours on your project, which translates into like a lower bill from that designer or that company. And I have my contact information at the end if anyone wanted to contact me directly, but I'm going to leave it here on this slide. And I don't know, Becca, were there any questions or maybe everyone's overwhelmed with all my talk about?
No, that was awesome. It was a lot of information, but you did a great job, I feel like, of kind of making it all understandable and giving us good reasons behind your logic on all of that. If anyone has any questions, you're welcome to drop them in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and hop in and ask away. I will actually start. I had one question you mentioned, like when using Canva templates and things like that. You don't have the legal rights to the logo, like someone else could use the same logo. If you hire a designer like yourself or an agency, do they do the trademark filing for you, or like how does all of that work to make sure that you're
So I
right?
would imagine with a full service agency, they have teammates that would actually do the filing for you. I've never filed on behalf of my clients because I do not have a degree, nor does anybody that I work with have the capabilities of doing actual legal filings on your behalf. So it's actually a pretty simple process. I've trademarked two different businesses myself. Once you have all the files that you own and that they are unique to you and they are created by a designer that you have the rights to, you can take those images and fill out a very simple form on I think it's U.S. Patent Trademark Office, something like that. If you Google it, you'll come across it. And then you can file for it yourself, or you can hire an attorney to file for you. Now there is technically some level of protection that you have if you have not trademarked your logo. If you own a unique logo that was designed either for you by a designer, or if you designed one yourself that you exclusively did from scratch, you technically own the rights to that logo even without filing the trademark. As long as you can prove that you were using that logo longer and before whoever tried to steal it or infringe upon it started using it. That can be very difficult to prove. So a lot of brands find it easier to just go ahead and file their own trademarks, and that way everything's documented. And there's no questions regarding, going to court or should anything like that come up. But yeah, you actually own the rights without filing officially. You just have to prove it, which can be an expensive process.
Right, that makes sense. Thank you.
Sure.
I have a
Any
question
other
as folks come to me, trying to figure out their business name. What do you suggest on, to make sure they're not, using somebody else's name?
Oh,
So
yeah.
do you just go out to Google if you're helping a client try to figure out that, or?
Google's a great place to start, especially as they're kind of going through a brainstorming process if they have not a lot of direction. If there's a name that's selected that they're like, I really want to be, I don't know, like Bob's Mechanic Shop or whatever, then there's two different things that you can do. The U.S. Patent and Trademark website, that's all very searchable. It's not a very beautiful website, but it's easy to use. So you can
Okay.
search through that, and then you can see, all right, there is 4 Bob's Mechanic Shops. One's in New York, one's in Florida, one's wherever. And then you can look up and see what their logos look like. You can see where they operate. And additionally, you would want to go to like in our case, the Missouri and probably also the Kansas, just based on where we're at
Mhm.
geographically. They have state websites where you can search any business name that is current and operating. And you're actually not allowed to register a business in the same state as another business that's using that exact same name. So like there may be like a Bob's Barbershop and you can be Bob's Mechanic, but if there's already a Bob's Mechanic shop and it's in St. Louis, you cannot use that here in Kansas City. So the actual state website will prevent you from getting licensed or registered at all. So those are the best two places to start. And then you just have to determine, okay, there's already a Bob Mechanic shop in Florida. Do I care? Am I okay like sharing that name? I don't think there's probably going to be a lot of customer confusion. So I'm still going to go with it.
Thank you.
Nice. There you go.
Any other questions? Okay, well, you guys, Whitney's one of our members, and so you have access to her within your member information center. But thank you very much, Whitney. That was very helpful
You're
information
welcome.
and
Sure.
questions that people ask me all the time. So thank you. Our next Power Hour is on Tuesday, May 6th. It's 10 a.m. again via Zoom. It's Power Hour Conflict Resolution in the Workplace, presented by Mitch Gingham. He's an HR resource coordinator for Ironwood. So thank you guys again. Again, you have Whitney's contact information, but if you need help with anything, let me know. We can put you in touch with her. Everybody have a good day.
Thank you.